She stole $200, $0 from our joint account, then filed for divorce claiming I've been unfaithful, only to find out she's been secretly battling me over our house worth $500,000 in a bitter legal fight I never saw coming. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife turned out to be nothing like the woman I thought I married. The craziest part, it all started with something as simple as noticing her phone wasn't where she usually kept it. At first, I brushed it off. She's a busy woman, always on her phone, scrolling through social media, texting her friends. But then I caught her in a lie. Not a little lie either, a big one. And that lie led me straight into a nightmare I never saw coming. It was about 2 weeks ago when I first got suspicious. Had been acting weird. She'd suddenly started coming home late, claiming she was working late or meeting up with a friend. She'd always been a bit secretive about her phone, but lately she was downright paranoid about it. One night, I decided to check her messages while she was in the shower. I know, trust is supposed to be sacred, but after months of her dodging my questions and changing her passwords, I couldn't take it anymore. When I unlocked her phone, my stomach dropped. There were texts, flirty ones, suggestive, and from a number I didn't recognize. But what really hit me was the time stamps. She'd been texting this guy late into the night almost every night for the past month. The way they talked, the things they said, it wasn't just friendly. It was clear she was cheating on me, and not just emotionally. The messages were full of promises, plans to meet up, and even talk about secrets she'd kept from me. I felt sick. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? Was she just lying about everything? I felt betrayed on a level I'd never experienced before. I'd always thought was the perfect wife. She was charming, always took care of the house, and we had a good life. Or so I thought. But now the foundation of my world was crumbling. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring at her phone, trying to process what I'd just found out. I felt a mix of anger, hurt, and confusion. How could she do this? We had a joint account with a decent amount of money, around $200, $0 in savings, and I knew she had been secretly draining it. I'd noticed some irregular transactions, but I never suspected it was this bad. Turns out she'd stolen a large chunk of that money, about $200, $0, probably to fund her secret life with. That's when I realized this wasn't just about cheating. It was also about betrayal of our entire financial life. Next day, I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I found her in the kitchen making coffee, acting like she had no idea I knew. I asked her directly about. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she spat out some bullshit about me not trusting her, and how I was just being paranoid. She called me insecure, said I was imagining things. But I had the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, the texts. I threw everything on the table, and her face turned white. Her reaction was classic. She lied, then accused me of being controlling. She called me possessive and jealous, said she was just talking with a friend. Yeah, right, I could see right through her. Her eyes were darting, trying to find a way out of it, but I wasn't buying her crap anymore. I told her I knew about the affair, about the money, everything. That's when she started crying, fake tears, I'm sure, and told me she was sorry, but she needed her space. She insisted she was just confused, that it was a mistake, that she loved me but was lonely. That moment was a punch to the gut. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. The woman I'd trusted, the woman I'd built my life with, was cheating on me and stealing from us, all in one shot. I was furious, but more than that, I was hurt. I never thought she'd betray me like this. I couldn't sleep that night, replaying everything over and over. The worst part, I knew this wasn't over. There was a lot more to uncover, and I had to decide what to do next. I realized I was at a crossroads. I could either try to work it out, forgive her and move on, or cut my losses and fight for what was mine, our money, our house, our dignity. But the truth was, I was already planning my revenge. I didn't want her to get away with it. Not just the affair, but the betrayal of our life savings, our home, everything we built together. I needed to make her pay in a way she wouldn't forget. And honestly, I was starting to see that this was bigger than just her cheating. This was about justice, about reclaiming what was mine. That's how it all started. The shock, the anger, the realization that I was married to someone I barely recognized anymore. I knew I had to act fast. If she thought she could get away with everything, she was dead wrong. But I also knew that whatever I did next, it was going to change everything forever. The next few days were a blur of planning and trying to keep my composure. I couldn't let her see how much she'd rattled me, but inside I was boiling. I spent hours digging through bank statements, online accounts, and legal documents. The more I looked, the more I realized how deep her betrayal went. She'd been secretly draining our joint account 200, gone, just like I suspected. She hidden the money in offshore accounts and shell companies I'd never even heard of. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. I also found out she had been secretly fighting me over our house, worth about $500,000, filing legal papers to push me out. She told everyone I was unfaithful, but behind the scenes, she was orchestrating this whole scheme. That woman was a bitch. She lied about everything, even about her own feelings. She had been secretly battling me over our house, trying to get full control while I was busy trying to save my marriage. All the while she was sleeping with, spending our money, and plotting her escape. I felt like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I had my own game plan. I didn't want her to get away with any of it. I decided to gather all the evidence, screenshots, bank records, legal filings, and consult a lawyer. I couldn't risk her twisting the story or trying to claim she was the victim. She was manipulative, and I knew she'd try to spin things her way. I had to be prepared. I also contacted a private investigator to confirm what I already suspected, that she was cheating on me with and that she'd been lying about her whereabouts during her late nights at work. One evening I came home earlier than usual. I wanted to catch her in the act, or at least get a sense of what she was up to. I hid in the bedroom, watching her sneakily check her phone, just like I'd seen her do before. She was texting again. I could tell from the way she was holding the phone and typing. She was nervous, like she knew I was onto her. I felt a rush of anger and disgust. How could she be so brazen? She had lied to me for months, stolen from us, and now she was still sneaking around with some guy while pretending everything was fine. I decided it was time to confront her again, face to face. I called her into the living room, laid everything out on the table: bank statements, the texts, the legal filings. Her face twisted into a scowl. She tried to deny everything, claiming I was crazy, paranoid, and that I was making things up. She said she was just talking to and that I was overreacting. But I had her dead to rights. I showed her everything and her excuses crumbled. She started crying again, but I knew better. Those tears were fake, they always were. She told me she was sorry, but that it was too late to fix things. She said she loved me but was confused, that she needed space. That's when I snapped. I told her she'd stolen from us, our savings, our house, everything. I said I wasn't going to let her walk away with it. She'd betrayed my trust, lied about her feelings, and now she was trying to manipulate her way out of it. I told her I was done playing nice. If she wanted a divorce, she'd get one, but she wasn't going to take everything without paying a price. That night, I stayed up late, drafting a plan. I contacted my lawyer, who told me I had a solid case, not just for divorce, but also for recovering the money she stole and fighting her over the house. I also hired a forensic accountant. Trace every dollar she'd taken. I knew I had to act fast. She was planning to file for divorce, claiming I'd been unfaithful, another lie she'd spin to get the upper hand. But I wasn't going to let her do that without consequences. The emotional toll was immense. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I kept asking myself how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could steal from us and still look me in the eye. The woman I'd loved for years had turned into a stranger, a thief, a manipulator. But I also knew I couldn't let her see me break. I had to stay strong, gather evidence, and prepare for the fight of my life. I was done being naive, had revealed her true colors, and now I had to fight to protect what was mine: our house, our money, my dignity. I didn't say much to her after that night. I just kept my distance, letting her stew in her lies. I knew I had her cornered. She was caught in her web of deception, and I was ready to unspool it all. The next step was legal, getting everything documented, making sure she couldn't manipulate her way out of what she'd done. This was about more than just revenge, it was about justice. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she'd stolen, me, our house, our savings, not without a fight. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I met with my lawyer first thing in the morning, had to get everything in motion fast. We discussed the evidence. I had screenshots of the texts, bank statements showing the illegal withdrawals, proof of her illegal attempts to claim the house. I also handed over the legal filings she'd submitted, which were clearly designed to push me out and give her full control. My lawyer looked over everything and told me I had a very strong case, especially since I could prove she'd been secretly draining our funds and fighting me over the house with false claims. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator to dig into her activities. Turns out she'd been seeing for months, sneaking around behind my back, and she'd even been covertly transferring money into offshore accounts through shell companies. I was stunned. How could she be so cold, so manipulative? It was like she'd planned this entire betrayal from start. I also started to prepare emotionally. Every time I thought about her lying, cheating, stealing, I felt like I was losing my mind. I trusted her with everything, my life, my future, our shared dreams. And she turned around and betrayed every single one of those. I felt a deep ache in my chest, a mix of sadness and rage. But I knew I had to stay composed. If I was going to fight for what was mine, I had to keep control of my emotions. One day, I decided to confront her again. I told her I knew everything, the affair, the money theft, her legal moves against me. I told her I was done with her lies, that I was going to fight for our house and the money she stole. Her reaction was classic. She played the victim, crying and claiming I was crazy for accusing her of all this. She said she loved me and that I was just jealous. She insisted she was only talking to, that she'd never cheat on me, even though I had the proof right in front of her face. I didn't buy her act. I told her I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. I was tired of her lies, tired of her manipulations. I told her she was caught and she needed to face the consequences. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the documents spread out in front of me, realizing I was about to take her to court. I had to, not just to protect the house and the money, but also to hold her accountable for everything she'd done. The emotional toll hit me hard. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, so angry I could barely sleep. I kept asking myself how she could do this to us, how she could lie and steal and then pretend to be the victim. But I also knew I couldn't let her see me weaken. I had to be strong for myself, for what was left of my dignity. I realized that I'd been naive for trusting her so blindly, but that was over now. I was done playing nice. I decided that I wouldn't try to salvage the marriage. There was too much damage, too many lies. Instead, I would focus on protecting myself and my assets. I knew she'd try to spin the story, say I was the unfaithful one, but I had the evidence to prove otherwise. I was ready to fight for everything she tried to steal from us, our house, our savings, my reputation. I was angry, yes, but also determined. Justice would be served. In the meantime, I started looking into how to handle the legal fight over the house. I found out she'd already filed for divorce, claiming I'd been unfaithful, trying to paint me as the bad guy. That was her tactic: lie, cheat, steal, and then cry victim. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had the proof and I was going to fight her in court. I knew this was just the beginning of a long, ugly battle, but I was ready for it. I had to be. For myself, for what she'd taken from me, and for the truth. Every day felt like a new battle, but I kept telling myself I'd come out of this stronger. I'd rebuild, even if it meant starting over from nothing. I'd lost a lot: trust, money, my sense of security, but I still had my dignity. And at the end of the day, that mattered more than anything. I'd learned a hard lesson about trust and betrayal, but I also learned I was capable of fighting for myself. And that, I realized, was the most important thing of all. The legal process moved faster than I expected. My lawyer filed a counterclaim, demanding the return of the stolen money and full disclosure of all her offshore accounts. I also made it clear I wasn't going to give her a free pass just because she was crying crocodile tears. The court documents painted a picture of a woman who had lied, cheated, and manipulated her way into a financial and emotional mess. Meanwhile, I kept digging, trying to connect every piece. Every dollar she'd stolen, every lie she'd told, every secret she'd kept. One afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer saying she'd subpoenaed her bank records. They revealed she'd transferred an additional $50, $0 into a foreign account just days before I found out about everything. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for a while. I felt a mix of rage and frustration. How could she do this to me, to us? All those years, all the plans we made, gone in a matter of months. And for what? Some guy, some fleeting affair, and a desperate attempt to wipe her hands clean of the mess she'd created. I also found out she had been secretly fighting me over the house, filing legal papers trying to get a court order to force me out. She claimed I was neglectful, unfaithful, and that I had abandoned my responsibilities. But the truth was, she was trying to take everything, our home, our future, while I was left trying to hold it all together. I couldn't believe how cold she'd become. She sat there, lying to everyone, spinning stories about how I was the bad guy. But I had proof, text messages, bank statements, legal filings that told a different story. One night I decided to confront her again, face to face. I brought all the evidence with me, printouts of her offshore accounts, the bank statements, the legal documents. She was caught off guard, trying to deny everything, but I laid it all out. I told her I knew she'd been planning this for months, that she'd been secretly draining our savings, that she'd been fighting me over the house while sleeping with. Her face turned red, and she started to lose her composure. She yelled, called me paranoid, jealous, and crazy. But I wasn't buying her act anymore. I told her I was done listening to her lies, that I had enough evidence to destroy her reputation and her claims. I warned her that I was going to fight her in court, not just for the money and the house, but for my dignity. I told her she could try to manipulate the system, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to make her pay for what she'd done. The look in her eyes, defeated, angry, and scared, told me I was finally getting through to her, that she realized she was cornered. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything, the betrayal, the theft, her lies. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but also like I was finally waking up from a nightmare. I'd trusted her, loved her, and she'd turned around and screwed me over. But now I was taking control. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I'd learned the hard way that people can hide their true nature behind a pretty face, but the truth always comes out in the end. The legal battle was about to get uglier, I knew that. She'd try to drag me through mud, spin stories, and manipulate the system. But I had the evidence, and I had my lawyer. I also started to prepare myself emotionally. I knew I'd have to face her in court, see her lie under oath, and endure the humiliation of her trying to paint me as the bad guy. But I was determined not to let her win. Not this time. In the midst of all this chaos, I also started to think about my own future. I realized I'd been so focused on her and her schemes that I'd ignored myself. I needed to rebuild, financially, emotionally, mentally. I was angry, yes, but I was also ready to move on. I didn't want her to control my life anymore. I'd lost a lot, but I still had my strength. And I was going to use that strength to come out of this stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever came next. The court date finally arrived sooner than I expected. I knew was going to do everything in her power to spin her web of lies, but I was ready. I had my evidence organized, bank statements, offshore account details, texts, legal filings, and my lawyer had prepared a solid case. Walking into that courtroom, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I was tired of being the victim, tired of her manipulating everything, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. The hearing was brutal. Showed up looking calm, almost smug, trying to act like she was the victim. She claimed I'd been unfaithful, that I'd neglected her, and that she was just trying to protect herself. But her words fell flat against the mountain of evidence I presented. My lawyer laid out everything, showing how she'd secretly drained our savings, transferred money offshore, and fought me over the house with false claims. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, scrutinizing every detail. His face started to crumble as the evidence was laid bare. She tried to deny the offshore accounts, claiming she had no idea about the transfers, but the bank records told a different story. She insisted she was innocent, that she loved me, and that I was just jealous. But I knew better. I saw through her lies. I saw her. Desperation. She was losing control. The most intense moment came when I told the court about how I'd discovered her affair with, how she'd been secretly planning her escape for months, and how she'd stolen from us. I explained how she'd been fighting me over the house, trying to push me out, all while she was sleeping with another man and draining our savings. My voice was steady, but inside I was furious. I wanted her to know I wasn't going to let her get away with it. When I finished, tried to get up and speak, but her voice cracked. She claimed she was sorry, that she'd made mistakes, but it was clear she was just trying to save herself. The judge looked at her, then at me, and finally made a ruling. She ordered to return the stolen money, to cease her legal harassment over the house, and to pay damages for the financial losses she caused. That moment felt like a huge weight lifted. I saw her face turn pale as she realized she was losing. But more than that, I felt a sense of closure. I had fought hard, played fair, and finally had the truth on my side. It was a victory, not just legally, but emotionally. I finally felt like I was reclaiming my life, my dignity. Of course, I knew this wasn't the end. She'd probably try to drag things out in court, appeal, or find some way to twist the story. But I was prepared for that. I had the evidence, the legal backing, and the clarity of knowing I'd done everything I could. That day, I walked out of the courtroom with a sense of relief I hadn't felt in months. I had fought for my future, and I had won. After the court ruling, I started the process of rebuilding. I closed the chapter on her, on the betrayal, on the stolen money. I filed for divorce, clean, straightforward, and began to figure out how to move forward. It was a long road ahead, but I knew I wouldn't let her destroy me. I'd learned a lot through this nightmare. Trust is fragile. People can hide their true selves behind a smile, and sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail just to get back what's yours. Looking back, I realize I could have been blind, trusting her blindly. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, even in the darkest moments, is the only way to get through. I don't regret fighting for what's rightfully mine, no matter how brutal it got. And if I could give anyone one piece of advice, it's this: don't let betrayal define you. Fight for your dignity, your money, your future. Because in the end, that's all you really have, yourself. And I refuse to let her take that from me. In the aftermath of everything, I finally took a step back and tried to breathe. The court case was over, was out of my life, and I had a big mess to clean up. I moved out of the house, left behind the memories and the betrayal, and started fresh. It wasn't easy, trust is shattered, and the pain of betrayal lingers. But slowly, I began rebuilding my life. I learned to be more cautious, more guarded, and most importantly, more aware that not everyone is who they seem to be. I've come to realize that the biggest lesson in all of this is about boundaries and trust. Betrayal showed me how fragile those can be, and how important it is to pay attention to the signs, no matter how small they seem at first. I also learned that sometimes the only way to handle a betrayal of this magnitude is to fight back with everything you've got. Sitting back and accepting it only gives the other person power over you. I refuse to let her control my story anymore. Financially, I've been rebuilding too. I managed to recover most of the stolen money through legal channels, but I know some of it was lost in fees and legal costs. Still, I feel a sense of victory knowing I took back what was mine. I've been working on saving again, setting new financial goals, and being more vigilant about our assets. I've also started to see a therapist to process everything emotionally, something I should have done sooner, honestly. The betrayal left scars, but I refuse to let it define me. Looking back, I sometimes wonder how I could have been so naive, trusting someone so completely, only to be like that. But I also remind myself that it's not about blame, it's about learning. I learned to listen to my gut, to spot the red flags early, and to never settle for less than honesty and loyalty. That's the kind of lesson you don't get from textbooks. It's learned the hard way. Now I focus on myself. I've reconnected with friends, started new hobbies, and even taken a trip to somewhere I'd always wanted to go. The pain is still there, but it's less sharp. It's more like a reminder, an experience that made me stronger. I don't dwell on the past anymore. Instead, I look forward, knowing I've survived the worst and come out the other side. If there's anything I want others to take away from my story, it's this: don't ignore the signs. Keep your eyes open. Trust is earned, not given blindly. And if you ever find yourself betrayed, remember that you have the strength to fight, to stand up for yourself, and to rebuild. No one is entitled to your happiness or your money. Those are your rights. And no matter how dark things get, there's always a way out. I've learned that sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest growth. Betrayal hurts, but it also teaches you who you really are. I'm not the same person I was a few months ago, and I'm proud of that. I've faced the storm, fought for my future, and now I'm finally starting to feel like I can breathe again. That's the real victory.